Hello everybody and welcome to the third video in our series of videos on Ireland between 1932 and 1990. Today we are going to be looking at the first inter-party government. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes, so by the end of this presentation you guys should know how the epidemic of TB was dealt with in the country of Ireland. You guys should know 4 other achievements of the inter-party government, and finally you guys should know what the mother and child scheme was and how it brought down the first inter-party government. So as we looked at last time, Fianna Fail lost power in 1948. They had been in power from 1932 up to 1948 for 16 years with Eamon de Valera as Taoiseach. He called for an election in 1948 expecting to win. One of the main reasons that he called for the election was the emergence of this new political party known as Clann or Family of the Republic. Clann were a Republican party. They had started out by campaigning for IRA members who had been interned during the emergency. They were led by this man here, Sean McBride. However, it wasn't old style republicanism. They also attracted to its ranks a lot of young radicals and social reformers who wanted to put together a new and inspiring program to kind of regenerate the country. In particular, we'll be looking at Noel Browne, who was one of these young men who was attracted to this new party. So in the election of 1948, no one party had enough seats to form a government, so a coalition government was formed using a diverse range of parties. Fine Gael, who we've met before, who were formed from Cumann na nGaedheal and the Blue Shirt organisation. Then you had Clann na Poblachta, who we've just met. You also had Labour. Remember, they were founded by James Connolly of the 1916 Rising fame and 1930 lockout fame. Then you had Clann na Talamh, which were a farmer party, and then 12 independents also joined the government. So it really was the first truly kind of rainbow government. You had people really with many different kind of viewpoints having to work together. John A. Costello of Fine Gael was named as the first Taoiseach. He wasn't actually the leader of the party. Richard Mulcahy was, but people wouldn't accept him as the Taoiseach, so Costello became Taoiseach instead. The first thing Costello did was that he declared Ireland a republic. Remember, thanks to de Valera's dismantling of the Anglo-Irish Treaty and the Anglo-Irish Agreement, whereby Ireland finally got back to 3 treaty ports, Ireland was a republic in everything but name. Costello was on a state visit to Canada in 1948. He took umbrage at having to toast to our king with the Prime Minister of Canada, as Ireland was still part of the Commonwealth technically, and he decided that he was going to declare Ireland a republic. So it officially became a republic on Easter Monday of 1949. The next big thing that this government really had to deal with was a thing called TB or tuberculosis. It was so widespread it was known as the White Death in the country. And approximately 4,000 young Irish men and women died from TB every year. The death rate in Ireland was particularly shameful. 124 out of every 100,000 people in the country died from tuberculosis, whereas north of the border that was only 80, in Scotland it was only 79, and in England and Wales it was actually half the amount of people were dying from TB. It was not just a massive killer, but also survivors could be left severely paralysed. Noel Browne is a man who had many tragedies in his life with TB. He had lost a sister, he had lost parents, his brother had been again disabled from contracting TB, and he went to England where he had kind of tried to study the causes of TB, how to deal with TB, and he launched a massive campaign to eradicate TB. There was 2 main aspects of his campaign. The BCG vaccine was brought in, and the number of deaths went down severely. And he also made sure that conditions in sanatoriums, which were these special hospitals, were improved, that more beds were being provided for people with TB, so that it wouldn't spread. And within 10 years, from 124 per 100,000 people dying, it was down to only 24 out of every 100,000 people were dying, and to the point where now it has been eradicated from Irish society. It was something that everyone kind of feared within the society, but thanks to Noel Browne and the inter-party government, this was overcome. There were some other very big achievements from the inter-party government. They brought in a rural electrification scheme, which brought electricity to houses in the countryside. They received Marshall aid. Remember, we saw that at the end of our studies on World War II, to try to help countries economically. Ireland benefited from this, getting over 40 million in loans and using it for a Land Rehabilitation Scheme. They set up the IDA, or the Industrial Development Authority, to attract foreign industry, and also they increased the amount of local authority houses being built for people on low incomes. Ireland was massively poor at the time. These houses were desperately needed, and by 1950 over 1,000 houses were being built a month. This brings us to really the thing that defines the inter-party government, and this is a thing called the Mother and Child Scheme. So infant mortality was a big issue in Ireland at the time, with 80 out of every 100,000 babies dying in the first years of their lives. Women dying in childbirth was also a big issue, with up to 100 women dying every year in childbirth. So Noel Browne, as the Minister of Health, proposed a new Health Act in 1950. And in this Health Act, he wanted free medical care for all mothers and children up to the age of 16. Fianna Fail had looked at bringing something like this in 1947, but were stopped by the people we're about to see. The first people who opposed it were the doctors. The doctors opposed the scheme as they didn't want to lose the fees that they got from private patients. They didn't want to be employed by the government. They didn't want an NHS-style health care system. And they wanted people means tested, so they wanted only people who were very poor could avail of this free medical care. The big factor, though, was the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church opposed the scheme. They felt it was a form of socialism, and they felt it would increase the power of the government or the state and reduce the power of the church in society, because now people will be dependent upon the church for something, which is something the Catholic Church didn't really like. They also feared that it would lead to the introduction of contraception and abortion, which the church was massively opposed to. So Archbishop John McQuaid, who was one of the primary writers of the Bunreacht na hÉireann, the Constitution of Ireland, in 1937, he met with the Taoiseach John Costello, who was an extremely devout Catholic man. He even had an altar built in his own home so that he could pray there. So he was very in line with the Catholic Church. McQuaid demanded that the scheme be scrapped. Noel Browne tried to argue his case with the church. He sent pamphlets to them trying to describe what he was trying to do. The church completely blanked these arguments and would not change their mind. So then Browne went behind the back of the government, behind the back of the church, and he gave an interview with Radio Éireann to try to explain the scheme, to try to get support for his plan. Unfortunately, within the government, there was no support. The pull of the Catholic Church and the pressure from the doctors meant that not even people within his own party, Clann Poblachta, actually supported him. They met, they had a discussion, nobody supported his scheme, and the leader of Clann Poblachta, McBride, demanded that Browne resign as the Minister for Health. So with the loss of Browne and another Clann Poblachta TD left with him in protest, an election was called, and the inter-party government was put out of power. Over the 50s, power kind of goes back and forth between Fianna Fail and inter-party government. 1951 to 54, Fianna Fail retake power. They lose power in 1954 to 57. The inter-party government takes power. It is a very different inter-party government, without the innovation and without the enthusiasm that the first inter-party government had, and were duly out of power within 3 years. And then from 1957 to 1959, Eamon de Valera is Taoiseach once again in Fianna Fail. We will be moving on to Sean Lemass in our next video. But the 50s, this era, like to go past a whole decade without much comment is hard to do. Politically, not a lot happened. It was very stagnant. The most striking aspect of life in Ireland during the 1950s was the poverty, the massive unemployment, and the large scale emigration. Again, on average, 40,000 people were emigrating every year out of this country. While other countries in Europe were booming with the help of Marshall Aid, with the help of huge markets opening up to them, but Ireland was really struggling. That brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now, you guys should know how TB was dealt with in Ireland. You guys should know 4 other achievements of the inter-party government. So the Declaration of the Republic, the rural electrification, the IDA, the Land Rehabilitation Programme, or the Local Housing Authority. And finally, you guys should know what the Mother and Child Scheme was and how it brought down the government. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something good from this video.